Good afternoon, everybody. Seeing a lot of faces. I mean, a lot of names. Seriously, Jessica, and
Later, but he was here as his like
Jay, Viviano, Xavier, Carissa, Tezel, Elizabeth, Lindsay, Ramit, Adrian, Dana, Carlene, Olalis, Carlos. Thank you for changing your your name, Jessica. All of you. Anyway, welcome back. We are coming in for a landing um, with our poetry section. So we're at the end of it. So as I mentioned at the top of the class when we began, the class is divided into three main sections. There's a fourth section, but three main. We'll be looking at poetry, and then we're going to transition into fiction, and then we'll do drama, and then we'll go back to spoken word, and interspersed and all that. We'll be talking about a research paper, but we're coming into the close of the poetry section. At the end of the poetry section, at 10 we end a genre. We we'll be doing a paper. So at this point, the last couple of weeks have been us diving into poetry, understanding how to read poetry, talk about poetry, and also constructing an essay. So today's going to be divided into two parts. So at the beginning, we're going to start out with doing. I'm going to read one poem. We're going to read two poems today. I'm going to read you one, and then we're going to spend the second half of the class um, talking about the paper. I want to just go over the assignment and leave room for any questions that you may have for the paper that is due on Monday. Okay. So if there are no questions, we will dive into it. Okay. All right. All right. I'm going to share my screen, and we're gonna roll. So I think at least one of you, and by now you should pretty much have a good idea of what poem that you want to write about or how you want to do your assignment. But I'll read two more. One is Maya Angelou, and she was a poet laureate, and she was also the inaugural poet for Clinton when Clinton. For one of Bill Clinton's years, she was the inaugural poet. And the inaugural poet is the poet who at every inauguration, there's a poet that's invited, and they read a poem for that. So Maya Angelou was that poet for Bill Clinton. Believe it was his second term. Um, so I'm going to read not her inaugural poem, but I'm going to read one of her famous poems called "Still I Rise." So again, I'll read it once, I'll read it a second time, and then we'll go through it slowly, and we'll identify the elements and themes and all that stuff inside of it. And I think at least one of you did this for your assignment. I'm recalling that. And I'll talk about those as well. All right, so "Still I Rise" by Maya Angelou, and here it is. You may write me down in history with your bitter, twisted lies. You may trod me in the very dirt, but still, like dust, I'll rise. Does my sassiness upset you? Why are you beset with gloom? Because I walk like I've got oil wells living in my living room. I'm pumping in my living room, sorry. Um, just like moons and like suns with the certainties of ties, just like hope springing high, still I rise. Did you want to see me broken? Bowed head and lowered eyes, shoulders falling down like teardrops weakened by my soulful cries? Does my haughtiness offend you? Don't you take it awful hard, cause I laugh like I've got gold mines digging in my own backyard. You may shoot me down with your words, you may cut me with your eyes, you may kill me with your hatefulness, but still, like air, I'll rise. Does my sexiness upset you? Does it come as a surprise that I dance like I've got diamonds at the meeting of my thighs? Out of the huts of history shame, I rise. Up from a past that's rooted in pain, I rise. I'm a black ocean leaping and wide, welling and swelling, I bear in the tide. Leaving behind nights of terror and fear, I rise. Into a daybreak that's wondrously clear, I rise. Bringing the gifts that my ancestors gave. I am the dream and the hope of the slave. I rise, I rise, I rise. So I'll read it again, and then we'll slow down and go through it. But I'll ask you after I read it, and at least one of you can respond because you did it as your assignment. But I'll get your impressions of the poem just from hearing it and seeing it on the page. You may write me down in history. I did the same thing the first time. Let me just get this together. I'm just trying to make it as big as possible because I know some of you look on your phone. And so it's, if I could make the text as big as possible. Okay. You may write me down in history with your bitter, twisted lies. You may trod me in the very dirt, but still, like dust, I'll rise. Does my sassiness upset you? Why are you beset with gloom? Because I walk like I've got oil wells pumping in my living room? Just like moons and like suns, with the certainty of tides, just like hope springing high, still I'll rise. Did you want to see me broken, bowed head and lowered eyes, shoulders falling down like teardrops, weakened by my soulful cries? Does my haughtiness offend you? Don't you take it awful hard, because I laugh like I've got gold mines digging in my own backyard. You may shoot me down with your words. You may cut me with your eyes. You may kill me with your hatefulness, but still like air I'll rise. Does my sexiness upset you? Does it come as a surprise that I dance like I've got diamonds at the meeting of my thighs? Out of the huts of history shame, I rise. Up from the past that's rooted in pain, I rise. I'm a black ocean leaping and wide, welling and swelling, I bear in the tide. Leaving behind the nights of terror and fear, I rise. Into a daybreak that's wondrously clear, I rise. Bringing the gifts that my ancestors gave, I am the dream and the hope of the slave. I rise, I rise, I rise. So what are any impressions? I'm going to stop sharing for a moment. Any impressions of the poem or any themes, anything you noticed in terms of poetic elements or techniques that Maya Angelou is employing in I Rise, Still I Rise. You can chat it, you can unmute.
There's a lot of repetition she uses in the poem. So she throughout the poem she repeats "I rise" a lot.
Yes, Elizabeth, that is. I mean, on the one hand, it got me all excited. I'm like, yes, of course. Yeah, it is. And this is an example of a poem of using repetition, right? Because repetition very often, is about emphasis, right? It's about reminding, it's about that. But in here, she uses it really cleverly, right? It's always, and she makes the comparison, right? She does the simile, like dust, I'll rise, like air, I'll rise, like all these things that keep rising up, right? That they're properties. It doesn't matter what's happening, they will rise, right? And so she does this parallel right between her condition, right, or a condition of oppression, and that regardless of whatever oppression is happening, they will rise. And she very effectively uses "I rise," and really powerfully. I'm going to go to the end, and I see somebody put something in the chat. I'm going to go to that chat in a minute. But if you look at the end, right, she does she says, I rise, I rise, I rise, like 3 times at the end, right? And there's something about amplification that happens with it. But if you think like I'll rise, I'll rise, I'll rise, like that, it just keeps going, like that rising, that soaring, that achieving, that moving forward just keeps happening. So Elizabeth, it was a very good observation to see that she uses repetition, right? And she uses repetition, in my opinion, very effectively, right? It's about really the if you think of the energy of the poem, there's the narrator is speaking in a situation that's trying to push down on them, but regardless of the situation, they rise, right? And that's the idea, and that's the word that gets repeated over and over. The very end, leaving behind the nights of terror and fear, right? I rise into a daybreak, right? So hopeful, that's wondrously clear. I rise, bringing the gifts that my ancestors gave me. It says, I am the dream and the hope of the slave. That's like crazy amazing, in my opinion, right? She's saying that who she is, as this powerful, accomplished, intelligent evidence, right, that she is amazing, right? That is what the slaves who couldn't fight the oppression in the same way dreamed of being like her. And so she is the fulfillment of that dream, right? What else? Oh, wait, let me go to the chat. Somebody put something in the chat. Here we go. Theme of confidence. Oh, yeah, right? That comes right through, right? The sense of confidence. And let's look at a couple of lines where we see that confidence, right? Right here. Even from the beginning, you can do that. But here, does my sassiness upset you, right? The sassiness is being kind of outspoken, being brazen, right? Like owning yourself. Why are you beset with gloom, right? Because I walk like I've got oils pumping in my living room. Now we know that that's not possible for her to have oils pumping in the living room. But that phrase, right? Oil wells pumping in the living room. Oil wells are about wealth, right? And so she's saying, I walk around like I'm a wealthy person, like I matter, like I have worth. And so does that make you sad that I walk around with this pride? Interesting that I do that, right? There's confidence all over the poem. But I love that she does confidence in like in terms of like history, in terms of her being sassy, right? In terms of her being up here, we say haughty. Haughty is like, also kind of like like I want to say sometimes haughty is like showing off, but showing off is not necessarily always a bad thing. But haughtiness is being like upfront in your face. I'm here, right? And so she goes, "Does my haughtiness offend you? Don't you take it awful hard because I laugh like I've got gold mines digging in my own backyard." Right? So she keeps bringing the reference back to the living room, the backyard, the kind of like where she comes from is a place of value, of wealth, right? That we are wealthy. The places we come from are wealthy. And then she says in the next stanza down here, I love that she goes to her sexiness, like her that she's a woman and she feels like she's sexy. And she's like, does my sexiness upset you? Does it come as a surprise that I dance like I've got diamonds at the meeting of my thighs, right? She's asking a question. So what's at the meeting of her thighs? Her vagina, right? Her womanhood. And she makes that comparison to diamonds, right? So she's always about wealth and valuable things, to oil wells, to gold mines, to diamonds. So in it, she's using both similes and metaphor, right? Like air, I'll rise, like dust, I'll rise, like I'm trying to find all the other similes in here, like air, like dust. And she's also doing metaphors, right? Because she's comparing, she's doing the idea of like I've got oils in my living room. She doesn't literally have oils, but she's saying that there's diamonds at the meeting of her thighs. We know there's not literally diamonds, but she's saying that what is there, like her womanhood is precious. It's as precious as a diamond. One other observation. Oops. Any other observation? I'll give you one. It might be obvious, but she's also working with rhyme, right? So you may write me down in history with your bitter twisted lies. You may trod me in the very dirt, but still like dust I'll rise, right? So lies rise, right? Gloom, room. So she's rhyming the second and fourth line, tides rise, right? Back here, let's see, she does it consistently, right? Eyes cries, hard yard, eyes rise, surprise thighs. And then here she's coming in for landing with the I rise, and then she brings us to I rise, and then the I rise, which is repetition. But here, if you notice, slave, gay, fear, clear, wide tide, shame, pain, she's working with a rhyme inside of here. There's something about the way the rhyme works too that's almost like musical. It's like there's something musical about it, right? So, so I wanted to make sure that we got to hear this poem by this great American poet. She's also written other things as well, and there's a little bio. So if you want to check out some more stuff about her. Do people hear of her before this? Oh, Christians. Anybody hear of Maya Angelou before this? No, other than the person who did the work. Yep, okay. Getting some chat action. Hold on a second. Yes, Vivian. Okay, in school. Okay, good. Lindsay. All right. So at least two of you have heard of Maya Angelou. Now, all of you have heard of Maya Angelou, and the next time you encounter her work, she will not be being introduced to you. She will be a poet for whom you will have another encounter. So yeah, there's another poem in our packet by her that's also one of her very famous poems, which is "Phenomenal Woman," and in that one she also uses repetition, but differently, and she does a similar. She does also a rhyme scheme inside of the Phenomenal Woman one. Okay, so the second and for now the last poet that we will have in the class, I'm going to share because I started with Maya Angelou was an inaugural poet. And this past year, last month, actually, we had the inauguration of a new president. So whenever there's an inauguration of a new president, at their inauguration, even if they get reelected, they pick a poet to deliver an inaugural poem. And so this year's poem was a young woman who was actually the poet laureate of the US named Amanda Gorman. Now, maybe some of you were not here, but about 2 years ago, Amanda Gorman came to Ostos, and she came and delivered a beautiful afternoon of poetry. And in that moment was telling us that part of her life plan is to run for president. So I'm going to vote for Amanda Gorman whenever that happens, because I think she's that determined that she would do it. But yeah, Amanda Gorman came to Ostos and she read, and it was wonderful to have her. And it was beautiful to see her on this national stage reading the inaugural poem. And so I'm going to, in case any of you missed it, I'm going to play it, and then we're going to look at the text of the poem. Okay, so let's see, how do I do this? If I hit this and I go here, yeah, here we go. Large screen so we can see it large, and play.
Mr. President, Mr. President, Dr. Biden, Madam Vice President, Mr. Emhoff, Americans, and the world. When day comes, we ask ourselves, where can we find light in this never-ending shade? The loss we carry, a sea we must wade. We've braved the belly of the beast. We've learned that quiet isn't always peace. In the norms and notions of what just isn't always just is. And yet the dawn is hours before we knew it. Somehow we do it. Somehow we've weathered and witnessed a nation that isn't broken, but simply unfinished. We, the successors of a country and a time where a skinny Black girl descended from slaves and raised by a single mother can dream of becoming president, only to find herself reciting for one. And yes, we are far from polished, far from pristine, but that doesn't mean we are striving to form a union that is perfect. We are striving to forge our union with purpose, to compose a country committed to all cultures, colors, characters, and conditions of man. And so we lift our gazes not to what stands between us, but what stands before us. We close the divide because we know to put our future first. We must first put our differences aside. We lay down our arms so we can reach out our arms to one another. We seek harm to none and harmony for all. Let the globe, if nothing else, say this is true. That even as we grieved, we grew, that even as we hurt, we hoped, that even as we tired, we tried, that we'll forever be tied together, victorious, not because we will never again know defeat, but because we will never again sow division. Scripture tells us to envision that everyone shall sit under their own vine and fig tree, and no one shall make them afraid. If we're to live up to our own time, then victory won't lie in the blade, but in all the bridges we've made. That is the promised glade, the hill we climb if only we dare it, because being American is more than a pride we inherit. It's the past we step into and how we repair it. We've seen a force that would shatter our nation rather than share it, would destroy our country if it meant delaying democracy. And this effort very nearly succeeded. But while democracy can be periodically delayed, it can never be permanently defeated. In this truth, in this faith we trust, for while we have our eyes on the future, history has its eyes on us. This is the era of just redemption. We feared it at its inception. We did not feel prepared to be the heirs of such a terrifying hour, but within it we found the power to author a new chapter, to offer hope and laughter to ourselves. So, while what we ask, how could we possibly prevail over catastrophe? Now it's hurt. How could catastrophe possibly prevail over us? We will not march back to what was, but move to what shall be, a country that is bruised but whole, benevolent but bold, fierce and free. We will not be turned around or interrupted by intimidation, because we know our inaction and inertia will be the inheritance of the next generation. Our blunders become their burdens. But one thing is certain: if we merge mercy with might and might with right, then love becomes our legacy and change our children's birthright. So let us leave behind a country better than the one we were left. With every breath from my bronze pounded chest, we will raise this wounded world into a wondrous one. We will rise from the gold-limbed hills of the west. We will rise from the wind-swept northeast, where our forefathers first realized revolution. We will rise from the lake-rimmed cities of the Midwestern states. We will rise from the sun-baked south. We will rebuild, reconcile, and recover in every known nook of our nation, in every corner called our country. Our people, diverse and beautiful, will emerge battered and beautiful. When day comes, we step out of the shade, aflame and unafraid. The new dawn blooms as we free it. For there is always light, if only we're brave enough to see it, if only we're brave enough to be it.
So that was Amanda Gorman. Let's see, got some chats. Very powerful and emotional. Sorry, my computer froze. Okay, it's okay. Christian, yeah, I noticed you've been popping in and out. It's cool. Yeah, Carissa, very, I mean, I agree. Other impressions of Amanda Gorman's poem. How many people had heard it before? You can just put it in the chat, yes, no, whatever. Yeah, first time, okay. Yeah, okay. Yeah, I'm just getting a read because so it was it is a super moving poem. Like, to think that she is young. And let's take a look at it. It's in your poetry packet. I included it in your poetry packet. Let me pull it up, and then we can take a look at it. I figure it'd be great. So page 11. Okay. So letting the page numbers on it, and a table of contents. For years, I would do this without a table of contents, and I was always flipping through. Here we go. All right. Yeah. So let's look a little bit at this poem, and I'm going to share my screen. Let's see. Other no, first time. Okay. Well, good. In a way, I'm glad I'm sharing this with all of you. So yeah, so Amanda Gorman starts her poem, right? When day comes, we ask ourselves, where can we find light in this never-ending shade, right? Now remember, she delivered this on January 20th. By this time, the insurrection had happened at the Capitol. We'd been spent several months hearing two bits of information. One from the standing president that the election was taken, and one from lawyers, the Supreme Court, and everybody else, the Attorney General, saying, "Okay, let's look into this." And they looked into it and they discovered no, that it wasn't. So we've been hearing this, and then a group of people felt they couldn't, they didn't want to believe it, and they decided to try to take matters into their own hand and interrupt the democratic process with the certification of the president. So after that happens, this young woman sees this and is in the midst of writing this poem, but then writes this poem. So she starts, when the day comes, we ask ourselves, where can we find the light in this never-ending shade, right? And it's interesting that she used the word shade, not darkness, right? But she says shade, because inside shade, there's still light, right? The loss we carry, a sea we must wade, right? The loss that we carry, the things that we carry. And for us, it could be loss, it could be pain. It's a sea that we must wade. We must get through the sea. We've braved the belly of the beast. We've learned that quiet isn't always peace, right? And the norms and notions of what just isn't always justice, right? So she's working with language, she's working with concepts, she's working with ideas. There's a lot happening inside of the poem, and she's really, yes, Alan, for sure. There's a message about hope and perseverance, right? She's talking as a person from a young generation, a generation that many of you may be from. I think she's in her 20s now. And so that some of you may be in, some of you are older, some may be younger. But she's speaking from this particular point of view, right? And her perspective. Right, so I left off here, like, and the norms and notions of what just isn't always justice. So things, the status quo, just because things are just as they are, doesn't always mean that they're just, right? That doesn't mean that it's justice. And so the excuse of like, oh, that's how it's always been, or that's how we do it, it can also not just be, just because it's just isn't justice. She goes, and yet dawn is ours. Before we knew it, somehow we do it. Right, that there's something instinctive, right? That when people, as Maya Angelou does, talks about I rise, I rise, I rise, there's something that despite the situations, truth rises, people rise, right? Justice rise. Somehow we've weathered and witnessed a nation that is broken, but simply a nation that isn't broken, she says, like it isn't broken, it's just unfinished, so that America is still a work in progress. And that's a powerful message coming from a young person, because the ones who will continue to build and rebuild are younger generations, right? Because sooner or later, even your professor one day will be gone from the earth, and many of you who are younger, if healthy and etc., and will continue to be the shapers of the world, right? Will we continue to feed the ideas, right? Create the things, write the stories, become the doctors and the nurses and the teachers and the workers and the digital designers. You will continue, right? So it's not broken, it's just unfinished, it's still in progress. We, the successors of a country and a time where a skinny Black girl descended from slaves. Interesting, Maya Angelou makes that connection as well. And here Amanda Gorman is continuing it. And raised by a single mother, so she adds another element to it, right? Because that's something, I would say, I can't say I was raised by a single mother because I was raised inside of a household, but I could relate to that. I only had one parent, for many years, but there was grandma, there was titi, there was uncles, there was cousins, right? But that somebody, where a skinny Black girl descended from slaves and was raised by a single mother, can dream of becoming a president, right? It's still a dream. And there's something that she says is only to find herself reciting for one, right? That there's something about that, it's still a dream, right? And she hasn't achieved it yet, but she's in the position of reciting, right? Reading from, so she's getting close, she's on a path. And yes, we are far from polished, far from pristine. Pristine means perfect, but that doesn't mean we are striving to form a union that is perfect, right? We're striving to forge a union with purpose, right? They to compose a country committed to all cultures, colors, characters, and conditions of man. you know, and I paused there because she is echoing even the Martin Luther King "I Had a Dream" speech, right? And if any of you, I should put that in the, that's a speech, not necessarily a poem, but you could look at it as this amazing poetry in it. So maybe I'll think about including that. But she's echoing that amazing civil rights leader about the dream, right? Of where we're not judged by the color of our skin, but the content of our character, right? And I'll continue. And so we lift our gazes not to what stands between us, instead of looking at what divides us, but what stands before us, right? Being hopeful, looking toward the future. We close the divide because we know to put our future first, right? Right? We must to put our future first, we must first put our differences aside, right? We lay down arms, which are like, weapons. We lay down arms so we can reach out our arms. Again, so he's working with words, right? How the word arms and arms are being used to one another. We seek to harm no one in harmony for all. Let the globe, if nothing else, say it is true, right? So, I mean, I'm going through this quickly because we could spend the whole class, 2 classes, talking about all of the information in this poem. But I'm going to come in for a landing in a minute. So let the globe, if nothing else, say it is true, right? So it's not just a country, but looking at us as human beings on a global planet, right? That has some weight. That even as we grieved, we grew, right? That even in sadness, we can grow up. That even as we hurt, we hoped, right? And then again, that starts to echo Maya Angelou's Still I Rise, right? Some of the ideas that even as we're tired, we tried, right? And if you look how she's using spelling, right? Tired and tried look similar, but they have very powerful juxtapositions. That we'll forever be tied together, right? Victorious, not because we will never again know defeat, but because we will never again style division, right? That we will never bring division into our communication, our DNA. Scripture tells us to envision that everyone shall sit under their own vine and fig tree, and no one shall make them afraid. If we're to live up to our own time, then victory won't lie in the blade, but in all the bridges we've made. That is the promise to Glade, right? So boom, suddenly she does afraid, and then she pops off of that and starts rhyming. Blade, made, glade. The hill we climb, if only we dare, it's because being American is more than a pride we inherit. It's the past we step into, right? And how we repair it, right? So how do we repair and forgive things in the past, And if we think of where she's coming from, there's a whole idea of slavery and reparations, and we can talk about that another time or after the poem. We've seen a force that would shatter our nation, right? Rather than share it, right? We would destroy our country if it meant delaying democracy. And this effort very nearly succeeded. So she is talking about the day of the inauguration. So I'm gonna stop for a minute and I'll come back to the class. And I'm gonna ask you to actually hold 1 second. I'll be right back. I'm back. I'm sorry if you can hear noise in the hallways. They're doing some construction, and they were, and literally, I don't know if I told you I have to move from my apartment, so because they're doing some major construction in this part of the building, and so I'm sorry, I get distracted because it's been that way for the last couple of weeks, but now they're saying it'll be in a week, but I'll be moving, so you might see this work in a different context, the artwork that I have. But all right, so getting back to Amanda Gorman's poem. So there is Yes, talking about the alt-right, there seems to be a message about hope. Okay, yes, no, just connecting. So yeah, so there's a lot happening inside of a poem. A poem is going to be a timestamp also in this particular time that we are living in, right? Because it's still ongoing. But that's that we can continue. But I bring her into the room so that we can know that she's in this packet. She's of course clearly the newest addition to the packet this year, with since her poem was just read and delivered on January 20th. So so it's a long poem, but as you can see, it's a very rich poem, and there's so many things happening in it in terms of poetic elements, in terms of themes, in terms of ideas. So sometimes students will look at a long poem like hers, longer than some of the poems that are in the poetry packet, and be like, I ain't touching that one because there's a lot going on with it. But also it gives you, but also sometimes long poems also give you a lot more to work with, right? A lot more of information that you could use to build an essay. So I'm going to use that as the segue so that we could spend some time talking about the essay. So first I want to bring your attention in a moment. Let me just get it up. Let me close out here. Remind you, and maybe we'll just do it all together. Yes. Oh, here we go. Let me share the screen. Oh yeah, I didn't upload the last class. I have to, because I apologize, I didn't upload it because I have to figure out how to snip it. Normally when class is over, I stop recording and then I could do, have conversations with students. But the last class I was having a conversation with a student and I didn't stop recording. So I just have to snip the ending and I haven't figured out how to do that. But yes, I do remember the road not taken. What do you want to say about that, Alan? Alan may be typing. Okay. Yes. Yes, about the idea of the choices that we make, making that parallel of the themes in Amanda Gorman's poem that are about like the decisions that we make, the life decisions that we make. I think, just to talk to all of you who are human beings on this planet and in this world, that there is, sometimes we may have challenging situations, but sometimes it's important to understand the choice that we have. Sometimes we say, oh, I have no choice. That sometimes you do have a choice, and sometimes the decisions can have, maybe not so consequential, but sometimes big consequential impacts, right? So, and you're making them every step of the way. I'm, in my 50s and I'm still making life decisions on things that I need to do for myself, for my society, for the world, etc. But yeah, so let me share my screen again and just go. So this I'm in our class. So if we go to course content, right? There is the lectures, right? And then I'm going to go into poetry. And this is writing an essay. So this is the handout that's there. So 2 classes ago, we went through this very slowly. We spent a lot of time on it. So if you want to look at that class, it's up already. I think that may be the last one that you see when you go in there, you click it. I'm going to upload tomorrow's and today's, and then they'll be in the folders as well. But here's all the instruction of what you need to do, talking about like an essay, the elements of constructing it, of how to, craft a thesis statement. And then on page, 6, is the assignment, right? So it's here. So student, let me make it bigger, right? Right, students are asked to select one poem or more poems from the poetry packet handout and or from the elements of poetry handout. So that's both the packet that has all the stuff in it or the elements of poetry, which we read, Nothing Gold Can Stay, the Shakespeare sonnet is in it, a couple things, couple poems we read from that one. So you could use that poems from there as well. And then you have to, and I say poem or poems because it could be more than one poem, to write an essay that identifies and illustrates the poetic terms explored in our classes and readings, right? Including, and these are what I mean by poetic terms: subject, theme, sound, imagery, rhyming schemes, metaphors, similes, types of poem or closed form, right? Like the closed form of the type of poem, among others. So there's more. This is not the definitive list. So you're going to read the poems, or you've read the poems, and you can you're going to be able to identify these works. So the essay should use, or can use, I should say, the 5-paragraph essay format, and can be up to 10 paragraphs. The essay should be between 3 and 4 pages, double space, 1-inch margins, 12-point Times Roman or Arial, and that's the font, and use MLA structure for the first page in the essay. So I'm going to skip down to this other part. So your front page should look like this, except don't worry about 1 of 4. As long as it says page 1, we're good with your last name, your name, my name, the course number, English 111, and the date, right? And then you're going to give it a title, and then it's going to lay out the paragraphs. You're going to indent the paragraphs, right? That's how I know it's a paragraph. It's not a space, a big space. It's just a regular double spacing that's happening, right? And each paragraph, right, gets indented, right? It's a 1-inch margin. I'm talking about just the physical look at the paper. There's a 1-inch margin, and it's going to go all the way to the end of, in this case, this one has 4 pages. And this one is 5 paragraphs, right? So that's the format. Then once you're done and finished, I'm going to ask you if you could work in Word, in Microsoft Word, or work as a Google Doc. I mean, if you save it as a PDF, if you work in some other format and you save it as a PDF, that is okay too. I can convert a PDF. But if it's a format that I can't open, then it's going to delay the grading of it. So I'm going to ask you if you can use Word, you can use Google Docs, or you can use, if you use another format or something like some Apple app like Pages or something like that, that you save it as a PDF. Almost every application that's word processing, you could save as a PDF and then upload that. So then you're going to go to your discussion section, and then you make sure. So if it's not there, then I have to put it. Okay, and let's see. Did I create it yet? Yes, so I'm going to move it to the top. I love when I surprise myself. I did it. I'm like, oh no, it's going to be so bad if I didn't do it. But I did it. All right, cool. So I'm now moving it to the top of the discussion section so that you can access it pretty easily. So you'll see it's right on top now. Right, so it's here. So here's the instructions. What I just read to you is there. Right. This one may have a little more. Students are asked to select 1 poem or more poems from the poetry packet handout or from the Elements of Poetry handout to write an essay that identifies and illustrates the poetic terms explored in our classes and readings. The poetic terms or poetic elements include theme, imagery, sound, imagery, rhyming schemes, metaphors, and similes, and type of poem or closed poem. Examples are sonnets, haiku, villanelle, etc., among others. The essay can use 5-paragraph format and can be up to 10 paragraphs. The essay should be between 3 and 4 pages, double space, 1-inch margins, 12-point Times Roman or Arial, and use MLA structure for the first page, page numbers, margins, line spacing, and overall essay structure. So then, as you have done with your other assignments, you're going to upload it here to this page, and then you can bow and say, thank you, poetry. We're done with the poetry section of this class. Okay. So I'm going to say one more thing. I'm coming back into the room. I'm going to say one more thing, and then I'm going to open it up for questions on the essay. So, so when I say poem or poems, right? So one way to approach this essay is to say, I'm going to use Amanda Gorman's, the inaugural poem, right? And I think what I'm going to use in there, I'm going to explore themes. I'm going to explore the theme of our life decisions, right? Let me just see what the theme of hope and perseverance, the theme of hope and the theme of perseverance, right? I got 3 themes I like, so I'm going to explore these 3 themes, and they can be all themes. And then you can say, this is, the theme of life decisions. This is when she's talking about this. This is the themes of hope is when she's speaking about this. And there's a theme of perseverance is when she's talking about this. And there'll be many examples inside of each one. And then you've done your essay. And it's only on theme, but it's 3 different themes inside of 1 poem. Okay. you could take the Amanda Gorman poem and you could say, maybe I'll do one theme as your assignment and do a poetic element. Maybe I'll use the way she uses language, right? And then I'm going to use the way she is using spelling, right? Because she works with the idea of justice and just is, and she's making all these parallels with sound, right? She's working with sound and spelling and how those the parallels between all of that. So then you've got three things, right? How she's working with words, how she's using language, and the theme of hope, right? So you can look at a theme and poetic elements. You can kind of mix it up, right? And stick with one poem, right? You can use more poems to talk about something. And one structure is that, let's say there's something about symbolism that you are drawn to, right? So that you could say, all right, I'm going to focus on symbolism. That's what I'm going to focus on in my poem and for my essay. And so sometimes you can possibly find one poem that has many symbols in it, right? And you can write your whole poem on symbols. The same way the first example is one poem all on themes, because there's so many themes inside of them. There's lots of examples, you can illustrate it, right? So you can do with that on poems, on symbolism, like do it with one poem, or you could say, look at symbolism and look how it looks in three different poems, right? So you can say, I'm gonna look at symbolism in Still I Rise. I'm gonna look at symbolism in The Queen by Pablo Neruda, and I'm gonna look at symbolism in First Poem for You by Kim Adonisio, right? About tattoos so there's ways you can look at. There's another way you can do the assignment, right? So all right, now I'm going to pause and see if anybody has any questions about what they need to do to upload their to write and upload the essay that's due on Monday. Just giving a moment for the ones who are not verbal and might be typing.
Okay, I have a quick question.
Sure.
For the essay, if we're using 2 poems, would it be 2 pages for each poem, or do you want us to combine the poems together?
Can you be a little more specific? Because I think what you're asking, I'm understanding it one way, but I want to make sure that I'm understanding it the way you're meaning it. So what?
Okay, so I'm going to use 2 poems, but do you want me to, like, the first poem, just talk about that one in the first 2 pages and then talk about the second poem in the next 2 pages?
So what are you going to talk about with each poem?
Like the similes, the metaphors, the theme.
Okay, so then how would your thesis statement look? Because remember, if we keep it simple with the last assignment that we did, right? I asked you to do one theme and one element, and then I said, in one sentence, tell me this is the theme and this is the element, right? This is the poetic. I'm going to discuss the theme of fear, and I'm going to look at how rhyming works in the poem, right? Mm-hmm. So for yours, how would you think? What would you say about let's say about the first poem?
That's a good question. I have to figure that part out.
Yeah. So that's why, in answering the question about the pages and how you're going to structure it, the thesis statement is going to determine how you structure it. So let me give you an example, Carissa. And let's just use the 2 poems that we had today, mm-hmm. right? Let's say you're going to say, one way you can approach it is you're going to say, I'm going to look at how, I'm going to look at the themes of hope and perseverance, and I'm going to look at how the poets use language in the poem, Still I Rise by Maya Angelou, and I'm forgetting the name of the inaugural poem. What does she call it? This is just called the inaugural poem. Yes, just called. And I'm going to look at, and so let me just rewind a second because I went to look at here. So I'm going to look at the theme of hope and perseverance and how language is used in the poem Still I Rise and the inaugural poem, right? So now what that tells me is that you're going to look at this theme and this element, and you're going to look at it inside of these 2 poems. So you can either organize it to one of many different ways. So one way you can organize it is say, I'm going to look at the theme and the element, right? Paragraph 1, paragraph 2 for one poem. And then I'm looking at the theme and the element, paragraph 1 and paragraph 2, which would be for the other poem, right? So that's one way to break it up. Or you're going to say, I'm going to look at the theme, and in that paragraph, and then say, in Still I Rise, it looks like this, and in the inaugural poem like that, and then the use of language, the poetic element, it looks like this in Maya Angelou's Still I Rise, and it looks like this in Amanda Gorman's, right? So you can organize it by the poetic element, right? Or you can organize it by the poem. Did that make sense? Okay.
That makes sense.
Okay, so then that would, all right, cool, good. If it makes sense to you, sometimes I need to shut up. Then like, you got it, you got it. All right, any other questions like this one, or any? Folks are good? You're feeling good? You know, I want to say, let me just add one more thing. So one of the things that you could do, let's say, you know, the assignment that you did for the last assignment, where you had to write a theme and a poem, a theme and an element, you could take that, and I gave you feedback on it, right? So you could take that and refashion it, right? And use that and build on it, not refashion it, but build on it to make it a complete essay, right? So you would have to write at least about one more thing, and you would have to create a conclusion, right? And of course, make any corrections, because one of the things, I don't know how this happens, but I'm editing somebody's story in another class, and and she did a revision, and the same errors from the revision are from the first draft or in the revision, not all, but some. And so I'm feeling like, what did the student look at? Like, what, you know, I spend a lot of time working on these papers. What was she thinking that she could submit something? And I could see it, because I'm like, I remember this error, I remember the spelling. So so if you are choosing to do that, as Viviano said, great. If you're choosing to build on your last assignment to do your final essay, just make sure that if I made comments on it, that you spell it, whatever I told you, indentation, whatever the issues were in your paper, the formatting, that when you submit your paper, that this is good for everybody, that it is on point. Okay, so your idea is to try to make it on point. Do we have to add a cite on the page poems? Good question, Elizabeth. The answer right now is no. Okay, so there's a method to the madness, but right now, in future essays that you're going to write in the class, we're going to do that. But we haven't spent time talking about citation and in-text citation. I'm going to do that when we're doing fiction, and there's going to be an exercise that you're going to have to do that's related to it. But I will say this: if you want to take a stab at it and say, I want to try doing citation, you will not lose points for trying it if you get it incorrect. Okay. So, so if you want to make an attempt and put citation, I encourage you to do it. If you have experience with it and you know it, or you want to look it up, you can definitely do in-text citation. And but if you get it wrong and it's not formatted right, you won't lose points for making the effort. Okay, I'm pausing to see if there are any other questions. Looking at the chat, you can unmute yourself. Okay. Well, I did I waited the minute. Okay. When is it? Yes. So Catherine, correct. It is due Monday, March 1st at 11:59 p.m. By midnight, before midnight, 11:59 p.m. on Monday. So we'll see each other on Monday. We'll begin. I'll pause. Yes, so that is the deadline. Any other questions? So I will stay here a little longer, because we have class till 1:45. But if you're good, you can say, goodbye in the chat, and we're done. On Monday, we'll begin fiction, but right now the only thing you need to focus on is getting your essay done. So get it done, turn it in. I look forward to reading them, and then I will stay here for another 5 or 10 minutes. If people have other questions, that's it. All right. If not, then have a great day. Great to see you. Yes.
Thank you, Professor. Bye.
Take care.
I have one question. If we have a draft, could we send it to you
Yes. So if you have a draft, you should send it to me at the latest. I would say the latest to send it, usually I say by tomorrow. I would say tomorrow by like noon would be the time. Oh, okay, we can say by the end of the day tomorrow. By 5 o'clock tomorrow, if you have a draft, I can take a look at it because I could look at it tomorrow night. And,
Okay.
And
go ahead.
and the drafts will be through email, right?
Yeah, just email me the draft. Don't put it on
Okay.
put it on there. Just email it to me if you want me to look at it.
Okay. All right.
Professor?
Yes.
So literally what we're doing is similar to what we did last time in our essays, is to
Yeah,
pick a
so-
poem, do it theme, and then a poetic and do a poem element.
Yeah, so that's something you can do. So you do that exercise so you have at least a structure. You're not confined to that, but the thing is, remember, it has to be at least 5-paragraph essay. So you have to look at
Yeah.
3 things in a poem. So if you want to do a theme, you could look at 2 themes and an element. You could look at 3 themes. You could look at 3 elements at least. You could look at 4 elements, 5 elements, a theme and 3, but at least 3 of something. And the also difference, the essay has a conclusion, which was not part of your last assignment.
Okay then.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you all. Good wishes.
Professor,
Yes.
yeah, for my essay, I saw the correction. There's only like one correction.
Mhm.
That's
So you have to
that's all.
make- Uh-huh.
Say it again. Sorry.
Yeah.
Is that the only correction I have to do?
Well, if that's the only correction, then that's the only correction you have to do. But that doesn't mean your essay is done.
Yeah, I got 2 more paragraphs. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So for the third paragraph, can it be another symbol or
Yeah.
metaphor or something? Or
Yeah. It could be another symbol, a metaphor, another poetic element. I don't remember your poem. It could be another theme that's in the poem.
another theme?
Yeah.
Okay. And then the last is the conclusion. That's it.
Right. The conclusion will
All
talk about everything.
Everything. Okay. All right. I have an idea what to do.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome, Viviano. All right, Dana, if you don't have anything else, I'm going to close out the class. All right, take care.